You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. Pac Div. You never know if you don't roll those dice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dungeon Master of None. I'm Dungeon Master Rob.
Yeah, baby. Okay, I had to do it once. Behave. Okay, I can't do the accent, but I'm Matt, and we're here.
And we're
with
getting
Tim.
groovy. We're
groovy.
We're groovy, baby. Yeah. We have a very special guest on today. Hello, Tim. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me. That might be the best intro I've had of these podcasts that I've done around Blade 68 so far. So thanks for that.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. We are very, as you can tell, very excited about Blade 68 and the vibe and the feel that you are going for. So yeah, this is we have on a special guest, Tim Denee, designer extraordinaire of such games as a Deathmatch Island and as we have been discussing, the upcoming Blades 68, and we want to talk to you about both of them. We had our good mutual friend John Harper on recently to talk to us about Ride or Die, which we're also very excited about, and he spoke.
Looks amazing. Yeah.
It looks really cool. He spoke very highly of you and mentioned that we should have you on to talk about Blade 68. Matt and I are both really big fans of the original Blades in the Dark and have been following the development of Blade 68 very closely. So why don't we
Does this perfectly encapsulated rules set make you Randy, baby? Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop with the Austin Powers references. It's the forbidden touchstone.
That's right. It's the forbidden touchdown. We're not allowed to talk about it.
Tell us what Blade 68 is about, Tim.
Yeah, tell us what it's about.
The short pitch is that it takes the same setting as Blades in the Dark. It's an official supplement, and it goes forward 100 years, so to 960 of the Imperial era. So it's the 60s, 968 rather, I should say. As the name would imply. So it is the year 68. It is the 60s, and things have kind of progressed to something analogous to the real world 60s. And so, yeah, you have swingers and the sort of swinging 60s side of things, but you also have kind of, espionage, paranoia. The paranormal aspect is still there, but in more of a kind of slightly weird sci-fi sort of 60s paranormal kind of way rather than the original Victorian ghostly stuff. There's a big blue bubble that provides fake daylight. Everything's a bit more retro, futuristic, sci-fi dystopia, but still very much Blades in the Dark. You're still a crew of criminals who are pulling heists, and it's, Ocean's 11 is a huge touchstone for Blades in the Dark. So that is a 60s movie. So.
Well, I feel like, we're talking bell bottoms, we're talking afros, we're talking paisley shirts and big tinted sunglasses, but I feel like
ties.
Yeah, skinny ties. I feel like the original Italian Job is a great sort of crossover touchstone for both games. You've got the vibe, but also it's a heist. They're hijinks.
I was going to say, any sort of Michael Caine 60s, 70s crime movie is bang on the money for me. It's not I'm not really playing Blade 68 until I busted out my bad Michael Caine impression. So,
is it a 60s caper if there isn't a Michael Caine or somebody doing a Michael Caine in it? It's not, you're not really living. This sort of gets me to I have a bunch of questions about inspirations and ideas, and we're both very excited about it. But I am sort of curious. The most interesting thing to me about this is the tone, because the original Blades in the Dark is very, I'm hesitant to use the word grim dark because that's not quite right, but it's dark. It's spooky. There's death and ghosts, and you hunt leviathans for their blood, and it's cool. But Blade 68 is groovier. It appears to be a little bit brighter colors, brighter tone. How did you go about that? Did you have any trouble sort of reconciling the core Blades in the Dark aesthetic with a more of a 60s update?
I've got a guess. What if all the horror of Empire and Extraction was hidden under a nice veneer of mid-century modern architecture and cool
What if?
cool shades?
Imagine that. Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the thing. But I mean, it's a great question, and I think that's where most of the energy and excitement of the project comes from. At least for me, like when I first shared images of this project when I was working on it, it was color versions of the map, and I think immediately that was the first thing I shared of this was a color version of my DOS4 street maps, and I think people got excited and intrigued because Blades in the Dark and DOSFall is, as you say, sort of quintessentially dark. It's in the name. Literally, there's no sunlight. It's a black and white book. You could not think of a more black and white setting in every sense, or a darker setting. And so to see that in color is immediately unexpected, and there's kind of a juxtaposition there that I think creates a lot of sort of like energy out of that. So that's the first thing, that it's foundational to the project that there's this like unexpectedness and this contrast between what Blades was and what Blades 68 is. So then I think you're right that the next part of the project becomes, how do you like gel those things? Like, it's one thing to say Blades in the Dark, but it's daytime, or Blades in color or whatever. But you kind of got to give it, there has to be some continuity between the two settings. It has to still feel like the same world, or else what are we even like doing here?
Right.
And I think it does. I mean, I think part of why the whole concept kind of works, at least for me, is the sort of swinging 60s London of it all, like a place that you do think of Victorian London quintessentially like dreary and grim, and the sort of maybe quintessential Victorian city. But then you also have 60s London, which again is like one of the quintessential 60s cities. So I think there's this kind of like pairing between the two. And when I think about 60s London, to Matt's point, I do think about, I looked at a lot of photos of it for this project, and a lot of it is like all the 60s murals and super graphics and neon signs and the stores on Carnaby Street and all this stuff. But it's all over the top of post-war England, and it's all very grim and grey and like dark behind that. So it is this just kind of coat of paint, this coat of 60s paint over what is still a pretty dreary place. No offense to any Londoners listening. One of the great cities of the world, but I think that's probably
it is
true.
dreary. Even the people who live there and like it will tell you that it's dreary from time to time.
Exactly. So I think there is some kind of instinctual level where I do think that works, and I think it kind of works for Blades 68 as well. At least for me, like when I sort of conceptualize DOSFall in the 60s, I can kind of see that like it's still this grim, dark place of back alleys and brick tenements and all of this stuff. Yeah, but there is this kind of veneer, this coat of paint on top of everything. Even the thing that protects everyone is called a bubble. Like, it's all very fragile. That's also one of the sort of fun parts of the setting for me is, you got daytime paranormal activity has kind of been tamped down better than ever before because of new technologies. Like some people don't even necessarily believe fully in ghosts. That's how far things have come. But all of that is so fragile. And so when you introduce player characters into the mix, like things are just inevitably going to tip over the edge, I think.
Yeah, the tipping things over the edge is what's perfect about, one of the many things that's perfect about Blades in the Dark, right? It's just everything is so precariously set up. Once the players start taking, just like literally do anything, do whatever you want, and we're going to have fun. I guess just to get into it, like what's an example of some of the things that are ready to crack, tip over, explode for players 100 years in the future now?
Yes, great question. I mean, I think what I really like about the way John did that in Blades in the Dark is it's all a lot of that exists in these quite lightweight faction write-ups, and so you don't have to read through 100 pages of like context for the GM to set up all these kind of explosive barrels. Like they're all buried in these factions, and you're going to put those factions into play. And so, as the GM, you're not even necessarily aware of what might explode. It just kind of explodes by itself. So it all feels very kinetic and dynamic, which is something I love about Blades in the Dark. So I tried to follow that example in Blade 68, obviously. So a lot does exist in the faction list and in their projects, and some of their conflicts between each other and the things they're working on. I mean, some examples. So there's quite a few factions who are experimenting with, again, the kind of retro futuristic sci-fi technology. So there's a lot in the space of time travel or alternate dimensions, people experimenting with paranormal technology that is deeply illegal and that threatens the like very stability of reality as we know it. And there's like at least 5 factions working on these things, so none of them will probably get it over the line, but once the player characters like maybe do a job for them and give them the thing they need, or you know, like
Things could get interesting. Yeah.
things could get interesting in various different ways. So that's on the kind of paranormal level. On the political level, there's this sort of Cold War analog. It's more of like a 3-way Cold War between Aruvia and Scotland and Akaros. But yeah, so in Blades in the Dark, of course, it's a global imperium, so they're all under one emperor. But by Blade 68, post Unity War 3, which is kind of ironically titled, but everything kind of broke apart, and now you have these separate nation states. So you've got much more of the kind of international espionage side of things, which fits with that kind of 60s Cold War stuff. And so there's various factions, again, that have kind of, less the paranormal explosive barrels and more the kind of Cold War intrigue. So Blackthorn Park are the Skov spies, and they're trying to steal military secrets. They would love to maybe pop the bubble and let in all the ghosts into Dosfall, or then you have the Palace opposing them, and Aruvia in the middle as a kind of isolationist power. And there's a lot of that, kind of espionage paranoia, which is quite fun. And again, as soon as you introduce player characters into that mix, things get pretty heated. So those are kind of 2 of the big ones, and then there's quite a few, the Bond movies, an important touchstone for Blade 68, and there's at least 3 or 4 factions that have very kind of like Bond villain inspired projects going on.
Sure. Giant satellite lasers and
very much, yeah,
mind control rays, and I assume things like that, things of that nature.
Yes, yeah, you've got exactly right. Mind control, giant lasers, super weapons, atomic bombs. Well, not atomic bombs, ultraplasmic bombs.
Ultraplasmic. I was going to ask if there was an atomic bomb analog, and that sounds perfect. Yeah.
Yes, there is an atomic bomb analog. Yeah. So that's another that's the 3rd kind of major explosive barrel, I would say.
This brings me to something that I wanted to ask about. One of our favorite parts of Blades in the Dark, and one of the things that I think that it does really well, is factions, and they're all very interesting. They all have very interesting motivations. They have cool projects and NPCs and leaders. It's a rich vein for me whenever I've been running Blades in the Dark. You don't have to give anything away, but if you can, I was wondering if you could tell us about some of these factions that appear 100 years later that are going to make a show up in Blade 68.
Yeah, there's 40 factions. It's pretty big faction list. In some places, like if you sort of go by like vertical, if you like in Blades, there's the Underworld, Institutions, Fringe, and the other one that I forget the name of. And so there's those 4 in Blades 68. So in terms of the Underworld, there's actually not a lot of familiar faces, because for me, I was like, my thinking was, if you looked at organized crime of the mid 19th century, there's not many like gangs that are still around from.
There's a lot of turnover in the organized crime space worldwide. It's not a legacy organization type of field.
No. Yeah, that's right. Not really in it for the 100-year longevity. So you see, there's a lot of new faces there, which is fun because we get to play with a lot of new factions. But there are some familiar faces, which I think is fun for fans of Blades, like the Unseen, obviously, as sort of Illuminati like organization. It makes sense that they would be around in the long term. And I've always loved the Unseen, so they're now like at the apex of their power, and a little bit Illuminati, also a little bit like Spectre, obviously from Bond, like a sort of international criminal organization. But then beyond that, another fun thing that it kind of plays with is sort of factions that are different to the original Blades ones, but find themselves in a similar niche. So there's kind of like, to quote George Lucas, like there's some rhyming going on, like similar
Like
but
poetry.
It's like poetry.
It's like poetry.
It rhymes. We actually used to have like a sound bar that
We had that on the
had
sound
that
bar.
quote on it,
Put it in
but
post.
we lost it. So
Again, it's like poetry, sort of they rhyme.
you're in good company. That's something we're often thinking about, that Lucas quote. But there's some rhymes to it. That's good. Yeah.
That's so funny you say that, because I play a lot on Roll20, and I always have that George Lucas as a little sound clip in there, so I can just mesh that. That's how often it comes up in my games.
It comes up a lot.
Yeah, what a guy. Yeah, so for example, in the original Blades, of course, the Lamp Blacks are a union of former lamplighters, and they've been put out of work, and so they sort of
Love
turn
those
to
guys.
organized crime. Yeah, classic Bears, great NPC. And so for Blade 68, they're not around, but there is the Blackjacks, who are the former Railjacks, the line bulls, the people who protected the trains. Well, now they've been put out of work by hulls, and so a similar thing has happened with those Railjacks have turned to crime, and so you kind of get a sort of similar feeling faction, but different entirely. And then, of course, a lot of 60s touchstones, like there's the Gallo family, who are sort of casino mobsters, and I think my favorite, the Fighting Goats, who are a rag sculler team, like a sports team turned to crime.
Nice. Amazing. Yeah, I was wondering about sports, about especially thinking about 60s London, high times of international football. Key aspect of the Cold War era.
Yeah, definitely something I wanted to nod to, especially one of the fun things about this project was I started it before I knew Deep Cuts existed, but Deep Cuts came out while I was working on Blade 68, and John had shared some early looks at that, and we'd shared drafts back and forth. And so because it was sort of coming out as I was working on this, there was a lot of kind of cross-pollination. And so, for example, in Deep Cuts, I think, was the first time John had kind of looked at the idea of sports teams in DOSVol and this Rag Sculler faction. And so it was really great for me to be able to pick that up and then look at the 60s version of that. Also, my favorite episode of, well, not my favorite episode, but a great episode of Mad Men is I don't know if you remember the Highlight episode where they're trying to promote this wacky sport.
That's a good
the
one.
Next
Yeah,
big thing.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
I just love that moment in time where it's like, yeah, it felt plausible that you could just launch a whole new sport.
Yeah, that's right. There was a time you could believe that you could, right?
I mean, that's one of the things I love about the 60s, like, and why I think it works here is it is the modern world as we know it. Like, it's got music that's very, sort of modern pop music as we know it, and modern advertising as we know it. Mega corporations, like things are in color rather than black and white. It's recognizable in that way, but it kind of feels like the start of all that, and so everything felt like full of possibility. Like it's sort of shapeable. You can kind of get your hands around it. Like you see that in Mad Men with people wanting to choose what the sport of the future will be and what that future will look like by hook or by crook. And I think that plays into Blade 68, where it is kind of the modern world. It's a much more modern version of DOSVol than we're used to, but it does feel like our player characters, our protagonists, can really steer where things go for better or worse. And so that's kind of a fun sort of combination of like recognizable but still shapeable. Like when I think about later decades, things feel much more set on their own terrible sort of precipitous decline into whatever's coming next. But yeah, I don't know. The 60s is that combination of kind of optimism and fragility.
Well, I'm not thinking of the movies and the music, right? 1968 is the year of global attempted revolutions, right? From Paris, or not revolutions, but like social change, like Paris, Mexico City. They're like all these things. I think there's even a book about it, just called 1968. Mark Kurlansky, a great light
Massive
read.
uprisings here in the U.S. Yeah, no,
yes,
it is
in the United States as well. And yeah, it is that like hinge point of the post-war era where everything seemed possible, and then things narrow down incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and that is a key reason for choosing. Like, I mean, obviously, it's not our 68, but that number, that year, has like resonance anyway, and so yeah, that was definitely a key part of kind of choosing that year for to be in the title. And I think that is a key part of the kind of feeling of the game. Like I think Hunter S. Thompson said 68 was like the high water mark when the wave broke and rolled back. And yeah, I just think there's something exciting about playing, if the core ethos, the core selling point of this is like Blades, but modern and color and daytime and positive. It's like, let's look at that bubble when it's at its most like shiny and poppable and then see what comes after.
Is there a Hunter S. Thompson gonzo journalist playbook?
There is no, actually. There is a journalist who's kind of in that space, but yeah, no, I missed a trick there. I should have included a Hunter S. Thompson analog.
We can save it for Blade 68 deeper cuts.
deeper cuts.
Deepest
right.
cuts.
The one in the book is more Columbo, which I know isn't a journalist, but it's kind of a Columbo.
Just one more thing.
Just like a Columbo. This this is interesting to me, and I it immediately made sense to me when I heard about Blade 68. But I would like to hear your thoughts, because there is a trend among or in TTRPGs, I think, where settings tend to be very static. I think it's actually like quite rare for them to update meaningfully. This is true across fantasy and science fiction. Sometimes you'll get a new edition and there will be minor advancements, but I think it's still like generally assumed that everything is going to kind of stay the same. So like I said, I think this is great. This makes perfect sense. This is a really cool idea, and it works really well, I think, with the setting. But like, what gave you the idea, and what pushed you to do this? Why did you want to do Blades in the Dark but 100 years later instead of something else or something entirely distinct?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like, I could have done Forged in the Dark, a game with the same system, but its own 60s retro sci-fi fantasy world or whatever. Like, yeah, why the setting? I mean, partly I feel like because of John's approach to the setting, it's kind of baked in that you have these jumps, not necessarily in the core book, but if you listen to interviews with John and stuff, they've talked about how this, I think, started as a fantasy campaign, like a home game, and then the sort of wizard character like broke the gates of death, and there was this kind of apocalyptic cataclysm caused by the player characters, and then they decided, so that kind of ended maybe one campaign, and they decided to pick up again in like 800 years in the future, and that's where Ghost Lines and then Blades in the Dark kind of came in. So that was already kind of like this radical choice to take like a fantasy campaign, which I think had like dwarves and the gates of death and magic and wizards and stuff, and then to turn it into this Victorian industrial fantasy, like Ghostbusters on a train kind of kind of thing. The Ghost Lines was so yeah, like baked into the setting is the possibility that you could do this jump and things can radically change. And this is a setting where like time matters and things do change over time and evolve. as opposed to something like Star Wars, where if you go back to Knights of the Old Republic or something, and go back, thousands of years, and it still looks like Star Wars. Everyone's got lightsabers. There's still Sith and whatever. Like, there's not really that sense that no matter how far time advances, it's still going to look like Star Wars, right? But Blades in the Dark was this other thing where John has baked in that things do evolve and change, and that's always been really interesting to me. Like, even in Deep Cuts, there's a whole section at the front about I think radio and the invention of radio and camera and motorcycle.
I remember that from Deep Cuts, which we reviewed and really liked, and I remember thinking that it was a very smart and thoughtful way of like saying, well, what might happen in the near future in Dosqual, and John was clearly thinking very hard about what technologies emerge naturally from this regime, and that's why Blade 68 made perfect sense to me when I heard about it. And it's interesting to hear that you were talking back and forth while John was working on Deep Cuts, because it seems like a similar impulse to see where the setting is going to go as time progresses, which I think is cool. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think we both enjoyed that. So that kind of worked from that perspective. I mean, for me, so that's why I felt like Blades was a good fit. I mean, why not make my own like bespoke setting? For me, I think you do gain so much by having this existing setting. Something I think about is, I've run plenty of Blades in the Dark and an old campaign of it, and it takes up so much like brain space when you run these games, or even as a player. You get invested in the characters and the NPCs and the factions and your version of Dosfall, and you spend a lot of time on it and with it. You think about it, and you finish that campaign. Sometimes you come back to them, but probably often you don't, and so they just sort of get discarded, and I guess that's fine. Like a good book, you can finish it and put it to the side, but I just feel like there's so much sort of emotional and mental investment. The idea of being able to like compost that and reuse it is really exciting to me as a starting off point for a new project. It's my favorite part about Blade 68 is callbacks to previous campaigns and thinking about like, hey, we've run Blades in the Dark. What does that mean for my campaign of Blade 68? Like, are there descendants of those NPCs? Are the events of that campaign going to mean that my version of the world is a bit different? Like, are certain factions maybe going to still be around or not be around, or, this kind of thing? So on that level, it's like, as soon as you start the game of Blade 68, if you're playing with people who have played Blades in the Dark before, you sort of have the shared understanding that I think is really powerful and quite rare in these games. Like, you don't necessarily have to start. I mean, you're still going to start with some kind of like session zero. You're going to have to explain to them like, why are we doing Austin Powers jokes? What's going on here? So there's a bit of that, but you get so much kind of like baked in if they already understand Blades in the Dark, and I think that's such a fun thing to play with, and not many games necessarily give you that opportunity to kind of build on campaigns you've run before and then do something sort of different but connected with it, like this kind of recycling process. And that's just at the start. But there's all this like time travel stuff in Blade 68, which is really there to open the door to playing with old campaigns as well. So you can easily have like old PCs show up or current PCs go back in time. There's a time travel playbook. Like it's really intended not to just be its own like capsule 60s thing, but to have these kind of like wormholes through to original Blades, and so you can kind of play backwards and forwards and really draw on the kind of richness of the original game and whatever investment you might have in it, and not just the game, but like the city of Dustfall, which I think is like one of the great kind of cities of role playing. Yeah, just kind of captures the imagination, and so to be able to have all that baked in is really powerful. And it's kind of, it is a love letter, and it is, it's like we'll always have Paris, that kind of thing. It's like we'll always have Dustfall, like this. So much kind of resonance and energy you get just from revisiting that city in a different light.
That's awesome and super dope. It does make me ask the question: if you're one of the people listening to this and you're like, well, I haven't played Blades in the Dark yet. Well, what are you doing? It was like our
Stop listening,
episode
go play
on the show.
Then come back.
That we talked about Blades in the Dark. But if you haven't, like, I think the touchstones are so obvious. James Bond films, weird 60s sci-fi, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the Venture Brothers. Everyone's going to get this setting. You're not going to have a problem telling your players, hey, this is a fantasy world, but it's the swinging 60s now. But like mechanically and I guess otherwise, do you feel like most people, is this a game designed for people who've already played Blades in the Dark, or are you going to be okay if you haven't really touched that yet and you want to like go straight to Blade 68?
Yeah, I do think you'll be more than okay. I've played with plenty of people who have no history of Blades in the Dark, and it's totally like I haven't had any issues at all. I mean, mechanically, you were just saying that this could have been like a Forged in the Dark own 60s setting, but then mechanically it would be the same thing. So, like learning that stuff, learning the mechanical stuff without the Blades context is totally fine, and the system is designed to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, setting wise, my feeling is most people don't know that much about what happened 100 years ago anyway, in the real world or in a fantasy world. So it's very easy to be in character as someone who does not know shit about what happened 100 years ago. Like, you really don't need to know. I think the vibes are simple enough. Like, it's a retro sci-fi dystopia. It's very 60s from top to bottom, but with this kind of like paranormal Ghostbusters stuff going on in the corners. And I think most people can get that quite easily. Obviously, there are some weird things like a fake bubble and fake daytime and stuff, but again, I think that it's all kind of congruent with the vibe. So I don't think people really have issues with any of that. And I think the upside, there are two upsides really. Like, it's not just that people don't have issues. I think also there are some people who maybe have heard about Blades in the Dark but never tried it because the whole industrial fantasy 19th century thing isn't their jam, which, like, it's fine. It's not for everyone. So I hope that maybe some of those people might give this a try instead as a way into Blades in the Dark, into a great setting and a great system. So yeah, that's one kind of thing. It's a different angle on the same thing, totally different vibe. And then I think there's also the benefit of, like, to go back to Star Wars, I think much has been said about the beauty of the original Star Wars movies, where it felt like there was all this depth and detail that was off screen, and the movies didn't have to go into that, but it felt like Boba Fett had a history, and it was better not to know that.
It was better not to know it. As an aside, I have now read or watched 4 different versions of Boba Fett's history and where he came from, and I mostly regret reading all of them. I wish I didn't know anything about Boba Fett. But sorry, continue about the what's off screen.
I'm curious.
As a New Zealander, are you besmirching the name of Boba Fett? Isn't the actor who
that's
plays
your boy?
Boba Fett from
That is
my boy,
Timur. Yeah,
countryman.
He is great, but it's not his fault that I'm tired of Boba Fett.
I agree. I like him in the role. It's just the rest of it's not his fault. Yes, but so that kind of like that feeling of a setting where there's all this detail, but you don't need to dig into it. But it's just a nice feeling that it's sort of implied history can be really powerful, and it's quite hard to kind of fake that from the jump. And so if you come to Blade 68 fresh, you might not have all that like Wikipedia knowledge of the setting, but I think there's kind of like a feeling of depth. It's like a slow cooked stew or something. Like there's this like undercurrent of flavor, and the setting will feel richer just because it is built on top of a very rich setting. And even if you don't, like a sommelier, pass out all those like bass notes, if I can extend my metaphor, you can still appreciate the kind of the richness of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I don't feel like I would have any trouble pitching this either to my players who have played Blades in the Dark or those who haven't. I don't think anyone would approach this and feel that they were missing out or had any questions in either way. Like you said, the touchstones and the vibe they're very well articulated, and you don't need to have played Blades to pick up what's happening. And I think and vibe with it. I do appreciate though that it's one of those things where if you have played Blades in the Dark and you do have some knowledge and history there. It probably deepens the experience, but I think, and I'll probably run this, so I'll have to do it and report back. But I have a feeling that it's probably not going to be that hard to sell people on. I have some questions about. So the backer kit for this is finished, but people can still pre-order it. Is that correct?
Yes, you can pre-order it through Evil Hat's website, and you can get all the backer kit exclusives. Like we did a fold-out map and cards for all the factions, because I designed a business card for every faction.
This was the thing that I had
So
a question
dope.
about, because I am normally I'm normally very suspicious of these extra goodies, and Matt and I have covered a lot of Kickstarters of dubious quality, but I gotta say, this stuff looks really cool. I really love the faction cards, and I think this is really interesting. So, because I think it's sort of, I think it's important and interesting, and clearly you have a designer's interest in this. Can you tell us about the sort of the extra stuff, the visual and material bonuses that come with the backer kits? You mentioned the faction cards, which are sick. I love these. I absolutely want this deck. But like, what else are you getting?
Yeah, I mean that's something I appreciate working with Evil Hat as the publisher on this. That I think we're all like very copacetic about, like not wanting just to put in little like plastic doodads and whatever to have various tiers. So we really try to make sure that everything that's in there is like useful at the table and looks good and like has hopefully some value. So yeah, I think there's some fun stuff in there. So there's the map, which is going to be a nice big like A0, I think it is, or slightly different to that, but roughly a big fold out accordion fold, almost like at a 60s subway or road map. And that will be a map of the city down to the street level color. So it'll be a really nice kind of table prop, very useful. So yeah, we've got these faction cards, one business card for every faction, which again, I think is really useful at the table because there's a lot of factions in Blades in the Dark and in Blade 68. It's a faction-based game, and you kind of want your players to remember what factions are in play at any time and how they relate. So being able to like toss down a card and have that visual like recognition, so you don't have to like, who are the palace again? But if you've seen the business card, you can kind of, you see it on the table, you kind of have that connection. So I think those.
It makes me want to buy a like 60s vintage Rolodex.
I was gonna say, does it come with the
put behind
Rolodex, or do you have to provide
my
your own?
DM
Because
screen so I
it-
can
it-
have the
yeah.
faction cards in there. Like,
We definitely looked into if we could do Rolodexes somehow, man.
I don't even know I don't know how you would make one. I don't know where you get one. But I would love the idea of having a little Rolodex. You're right that like a visual, just like a visual reminder, especially when you have so many factions, is probably good for players. I do find that my players, I'm a big faction guy in Blades and in all of my games, and I'm so excited about them, and my players are always like, sorry, who are these guys? And a little card is probably like a really good idea to have, something to trigger their memory.
Yes, and I tried to, I designed logos for all these things, and part of that was to try and like do the picture says 1,000 words type thing of like, hopefully each logo, as well as creating that like mental connection, is doing some heavy lifting in terms of remembering like what's the vibe of this faction. Like, are they sort of weird paranormal creeps, or are they like a Big Brother 1984 government entity or something? So some of that is kind of baked into the logos and the styling of the cards and should help, again, those kind of mental connections, which I think is fun. So that's the faction deck. And then there's the Player Gazette, which is this is like something I've found quite useful. So again, like you've got all these factions, there's also all these districts. All the districts have special rules. There's quite a lot in both Blades in the Dark and Blade 68 that it would be useful for the players to remember, but they don't necessarily remember all this stuff. And to their credit, there's a lot to remember. But often there's only one copy of the book at the table. The GM probably needs it to look up various things. So the Player Gazette is just a 32-page stapled player-facing copy of faction summaries and district summaries with some of the special rules and things. And that's just to have a second copy of that stuff at the table for the players, so they can, if they need to look up a particular faction to remember, what their deal is or what their special ability is, they can flick to that. Same with districts. So that's just kind of a handy, quick reference thing.
Oh, that's so nice. I mean, what I love about
yeah.
Blades in the Dark is how much agency it gives the players to be like, actually, we're going here this time to do this, and just being able to reference that, make things so much smoother. And I can't wait. Can't wait to do that with spies also involved. I know there's plenty of spying going on in Blades in the Dark, but with the I was just looking at your example, the Blackthorn Park USC spy organization. I'm like, oh, this is so perfect.
Yeah, big time. And something else that's kind of fun about Blade 68 is you can get these backing factions. So each player character can have their own like little sort of side piece faction on the side that they work for. And eventually, if they get in tight enough with them, they get like a prestige ability. So if you get in with Blackthorn Park, they kind of teach you their weird like ESP, like men who stare at goats kind of psychic combat techniques.
Nice.
This kind of thing. So
the Scovians are developing psychic technology. Why? Because they thought we were doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Exactly.
I can't
so
wait
there's
to
one-
put my players through Doskval MK Ultra. I'm gonna throw them in just like the weirdest psychedelic government experiences. Yeah,
big time,
yeah.
big time. That's Blade 68. Yeah, so every faction has its own prestige ability, and they're all in that player gazette. And I find again, like players kind of enjoy like flicking through and seeing what prestige abilities are available and which factions they might like to get in tight with. And I like that as a GM because I love it when every player has their own like conflicting, like this player is working for that faction, another character is working for this other faction. So you kind of tangle that web up and get some nice drama that way. And then the final thing I'll just mention is the Trouble deck. So the Trouble engine is from a game called A State, which is another Forged in the Dark game designed by Morgan Davey. We used it here. It's basically like an expanded entanglement table, essentially. Like it's way more entanglements. They're called troubles. And the Trouble deck just puts those into card format. And so instead of rolling on dice on a table in the book and then having to like remember what the details are, you can actually just shuffle the deck and like pull one out and put it on the table. So it's quite, again, kind of just like a nice form factor and quite handy as an actual like practical sort of game aid.
That's extremely cool, and brings me to sort of the one of my like final questions. And it's all right if the answer is no, but I'm wondering if there are any important or significant mechanical changes, any changes to the way the game is played, or any major or departures from Blades in the Dark or Forge in the Dark as a setting. I don't, or as a system. It would make sense if there weren't, but I'm just curious if you added any flourishes to that.
Yeah, there are a few flourishes. I mean, I sort of felt liberated by deep cuts in the sense that John positions that as like kind of their version of sort of almost house rules that they've been playing with in their home campaign, and then they kind of package them up as sort of modular subsystems and deep cuts. And they're kind of very much like you might get value out of this, but not necessarily, like it's not Blades in the Dark version 2, right? Like it's meant to be pick and choose. And so in that spirit of this being like a very modular game and a game that you're encouraged to kind of tinker with things and adjust them to your table, even though this is a supplement and it uses the Blades in the Dark rules, I did want to kind of tweak and tinker and include some modular elements to suit the kind of 60s, because it does have a different vibe to Blades in the Dark. It's less like pulling yourself up from the muck by your bootstraps, like Victorian paupers through to crime lords or whatever. It's a little bit more like Lupin the Third, again, Michael Caine, like crime caper-esque, a little bit lighter, a little bit more hectic, like a sort of more of an escapade perhaps, than a gritty crime thing. That's a subtle shift. It's still basically the same game, but I did want to kind of include some tweaks to that effect. So the big ones, harm is quite different. So harm no longer has mechanical penalties during the score, but it might complicate your life after the score. And what that does is it just means players aren't slowed down as they like jump off the top of a building or get hit by a train or get thrown through a window or whatever it is, which kind of encourages more of that kind of Bond Mission Impossible stuff of just like doing stupid Tom Cruise do your own stunts kind of, like you break your body and it won't be a bad time mechanically. You can still have fun with the rest of the score, and that's a problem when you wake up in the morning tomorrow. Kind of mentality there. So there's some changes around harm, which I think just kind of let the players go a bit harder and faster, which is all part of the tone of the game. There are some changes to trauma. So instead of trauma, you start with keys, which are like character traits. So you start by choosing some character traits for your player character, and you get XP when you live up to those. And then when you stress out, instead of gaining trauma, you deadlock a key, which is similar but slightly different. And again, it just opens the door to a bit more nuance, and it doesn't have to be quite the same sort of grim feeling. So instead of becoming like paranoid and cold as you might in Blades, you can actually, the deadlocked version of your key can be a positive. So you could start off as ruthless. When you run out of stress, you become kind, perhaps. And so you're becoming a better person, but that makes you a worse criminal.
Interesting.
The other big mechanical change, I'm guessing, is that there are better drugs in the 60s than in the original.
There are extensive notes on the drugs, actually. Yeah, there's a whole write-up on this.
Oh, that's super awesome.
So that's keys and deadlocks. And I guess the other thing I would just touch on, which I think is kind of a fun sort of mechanical tweak, is there's this thing called the planning meeting. So instead of just waiting for the GM to present opportunities, like in Core Blades, you'd kind of do downtime, do free play. The GM will kind of throw out like little ideas for what the next score might be. Like an NPC here might mention something. The players might have some ideas. It's very like organic kind of process. Blade 68 kind of turns that into more of a procedure where everybody puts forward one idea for what the next score could be, and the players can kind of invent like who the client might be or who the target might be if they want to hurt a particular faction, or just like what kind of score. So if they're dealers, they might just want to like acquire some products, like they might want to do a score to that. So everyone, including the GM, puts forward one idea. You roll randomly for the payout of each one, which also determines how difficult it is, and then the players pick which one they want to do next. Oh, nice. So it's a bit more of a procedure, but what I find it does is, one, it's not on the GM to sort of do a pick a path adventure of like, here are 3 opportunities and you pick one, because they're putting forward one, but the players are also all putting forward one. 2, it's kind of like a stars and wishes sort of thing. Like the players, by verbalizing the kind of score they want to do, it's so useful as a GM to know like, oh, this is what each player wants to do next. So that's really useful information, I've found.
Yeah, my experience with Blades of the Dark is sometimes players like, oh, we've picked this playbook for our crew, yet actually all the things we're doing are kind of like more like this, this other playbook.
Yeah, many such cases.
They think they're one thing, but they're actually they're not being honest. They're something else entirely. Yeah.
Yes, many such cases. And the third thing I like about that is that at any given table, I don't know if this is your experience, but you have players who are really into that kind of proactive planning and crew stuff, and they're really engaged with the faction system. And then you have players who are less interested about that and less aren't really putting forward those ideas and just kind of go with the flow with the rest of the crew. But I love making those players put forward an idea anyway, just because again, it's just, I want to know what those players want to do, even if they're not kind of the loud planning types. And so I want them to put forward their idea. And often I find that those are the ideas the players end up running with. And so it's just some like mechanical incentive to kind of encourage everyone to contribute to that and to make sure, because in Blades in the Dark, like the crew is meant to be the sort of the main character. And so I really want all the players to have like a hand on the wheel and to have a voice in that. And so this kind of, sort of formalizes that procedure a little bit.
That's perfect for your touchstones. You know, you have the Ocean's 11, and there are those characters that are like, all right, we know exactly which 3 casinos we're gonna hit. And then there's the other character that's like, hey, I'm in this game a little more casually. Why don't we just knock over some liquor stores? I'm good at driving a car. And you know that even if the players don't go with that, it allows them to be involved in the world. And you know, maybe one night knocking over a liquor store will be important. So
The thing to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I had wanted. We'd also wanted to talk a little bit about Deathmatch Island, but we've so much to say about Blades 68. So we might have to save that for a separate conversation. There is
if
some.
your players like the Hunger Games or have watched the first 3 seasons of Survivor and the subsequent 38 seasons of Survivor, if they think if you've had one of your players tell you, actually, you know, before the Squid Games, there was this much better movie called Battle Royale. If you have one of those people in your life, please check out Deathmatch Island. It's an amazing role-playing game about a battle royale on an island. If you like Severance, if you like any of these sci-fi things,
If
it's
you are
amazing.
one of the small but dedicated group of fans that loves the 1960s television show The Prisoner, the Deathmatch Island and Blades 68 are really like up your alley. I got extreme The Prisoner vibes from both of them. But yeah, well,
big time.
it is part of it is a Paragon system game, which we discussed with John in our Ride or Die episode. I am really interested to see, because because one of the things that John was talking about was trying to create sort of Paragon 2.0 that was a little bit easier to use for games that were not Greek myth inspired, and it seems like this is sort of like a step in that direction. So is Ride or Die, and I think it works really well for. I love Aegon. I love the Greek hero thing. That's great for me. But I can also see the utility of it in other types of games and settings. So I think Deathmatch Island is really cool. And clearly you were working with some of the similar inspirations and material for both of these.
Yeah, both definitely in my wheelhouse. So whatever I do next needs to be radically different. Just so people, it can't be another Prisoner inspired.
Sure.
1960s mid-century thing. But yeah, no, hey, that was a great Deathmatch Island pitch, by the way. I might just clip that out and run it as an ad or something.
Please do. We're big fans. It's a cool thing. Anything else you want to tell us about either of those before we let you go? According to your backer kit, the delivery timeline for Blade 68 is this August 2026, when people will be able to find actual physical books in their friendly local gaming store. Anything else that we ought to know?
No, just to say again, you can pre-order that stuff now, and once pre-orders close, like the backer kit exclusive stuff, that's the last chance to get those particular items. So it's worth checking that out. Everything's on track for that kind of August deadline, I think. Barring international catastrophes or what have you. But
sure, within things that you can control, right? Yeah.
Yes, but just this morning, I've exported just some print files this morning, and everything is in hand. So that's cool.
Do not walk your groovy self over to backerkit.com and pre-order this. Join the tens of thousands of others pledging over $500,000. This is incredibly popular for good reason.
And I mean, just on that, like part of it being so successful, we have a ton of stretch goal contributors. I forget the exact number, but got a really amazing roster of people with like bona fides in the Forged in the Dark and Blades in the Dark kind of space, especially. So I was really excited to be able to get all those people on board, making all sorts of things from like short fiction through to new factions, through to cold opens and ticking time bombs and all these like great material for the setting. That's all coming in right now at the moment. So I've been reviewing that, and it's all really great stuff, and it's going to be collected up, and everyone is going well over the suggested word count. So it's going to be a massive, a massive collection of content, but like super. I think it'll be like, yeah, again, really useful, practical stuff for people's games. Like there's stuff on what the comic scene is like in DOSFall 68 and the like movie kind of Hollywood analog, fashion, even like espionage kind of factions. And Emma Costa did a catalog of like jet plane fighters, turbo fighters.
Amazing.
Which is really cool.
Nice.
That is like one of my questions. Like, what is the MiG-17?
Yeah, what are
what's
the
the
cool,
turning
weird
radius
experimental
of the
aircraft?
Saber P?
Yeah.
Well, there's some amazing stuff in M's
awesome.
piece, so watch the space. And yeah, there's like, I forget the exact number, but dozens of these, and they're all really good. So I'm really excited to get that out to folks as well.
Yeah, there's some really cool names attached. There's Pam Punzalan, who did or was involved with Thirsty Sword Lesbians and a bunch of other things. Austin Walker, John Harper again, Sean Nittner, a bunch of really talented authors and designers. All of these cool stretch goals, really cool stuff. I'm very excited to see how this all turns out as well. Yeah.
It'll be collected as a separate PDF and maybe print on demand at some stage or something, but that's going to be basically like its own whole book straight out the gate of additional material for Blade 68. So yeah,
nice.
Pretty excited about that.
Well, Tim, I would like to close out. I would like your character to put a electroplasma ray gun bullet through the head of my character after a failed heist, and I've been captured by Scovian intelligence and turned as I sadly smoke a cigarette while La Mer by Julio Iglesias plays over the speakers at a sad montage after we wrap up this heist, because God, I love Blade 68. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing. I actually would like to put you on the spot and ask you what your favorite Bond is before we close. I really am very curious. Sorry, I know it's a tough question, but I have a feeling you might have an answer.
Yeah, it is hard to pick favorites. I would probably I don't know if this is boring. I'd have to go with Goldfinger, I think.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I was tempted. I do love some of the Roger Moore like campy ones, and there's definitely some of that in Blade 68. But I don't know. Goldfinger to me is like the kind of quintessential.
Yeah, it's core Bond. It's really like peak Bond. Yeah.
Yeah. And the some of those sets and the aesthetics of Goldfinger's lair, and it's even, I think that's the one with the giant laser, right? Which is like, you can't beat Bond on a big laser trap. I mean, iconic.
It's too good. Well, thanks again for coming on, Tim. Listeners will have links to all sorts of things in the show notes, but check out Blade 68. Check out Deathmatch Island. Thank you all for listening, and whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. Pac Div. You never know if you don't